Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, we have with us Brian K. Wright. Brian is the founder of Wright International, whose mission is to motivate and inspire others to discover their unique talents and follow their dreams in life. With extensive experience teaching and training in academic and corporate environments, he understands that many people live far beneath their potential, primarily because they don't really believe they deserve success. Through his experience and research, Brian has learned and practiced the principles he teaches in his book, Student Leadership Strategies, 21 Easy Ways to Become a Center of Influence in Your Group. Brian is also the host of the internet radio talk show Success Profile Radios on the Rockstar Radio Network. Brian holds a degree in communication studies and holds a master's degree in adult education from the University of Nebraska in London. He discovered a passion for speaking and influencing audiences by speaking competitively in high school and in college, and by being heavily involved on campus while in school. So we are very intrigued to hear Brian's story, his journey, a little bit about his show that he has on Rockstar Radio Network, and also lots of great stuff about his book. So without further delay, I'm going to hand over now to Brian. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Yannick. How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Fantastic. Thank you.
So before we actually start into the podcast flow of questions, I like to ask our guests a little bit about themselves, give you an opportunity to share who you are, your journey, and, how you got to this place where you are now, where you're doing such great things.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Boy, that question, I always wonder where exactly to start and how far back to go. But I'll just tell you that I, like you mentioned, I went to graduate school at University of Nebraska in Lincoln and got my degree in adult education. I did teach at a business college for almost 5 years. I taught public speaking, English composition, and business math. A really fun combination of classes. Now, you may wonder, what do all those classes have in common? Well, they were all required courses. So it was incumbent upon me to make it fun and interesting. And I would like to think that I did decent at that. Mm-hmm. So you have to make it fun. When someone is taking a class that's required, you have to make it fun. Because if you make it boring, if you make it tedious, if it becomes a chore, they stop coming. They don't want to come, and they just dread it. So you have to make it a little bit entertaining and make it fun somehow.
I agree.
So I did my best to do that. And it's interesting. I know your show focuses on customer service. I taught at this college, and it was a private college, and so they ran it like a business. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But they wanted to make sure that their students graduated and didn't drop out. And a lot of the students that were at this school were non-traditional age students, meaning that they were, older than, 21, 22, 18, 19 years old. And so a lot of them were returning adults coming back to school, maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or beyond. And so you wanted to create an experience that would encourage them to finish their classes and to finish school. A lot of these people who came to this school didn't like the traditional school environment. They, for whatever reason, decided not to continue after high school, but now they're realizing it's their opportunity to learn something that they might enjoy doing in their career. And so thinking of the student as a customer, you want to create the best experience for them so that they'll keep coming back and so that they will finish. And so that was also a fun way to visualize what I was doing too, was just to really be as helpful as I could and to make it as fun and entertainment while still making sure they learned what they were supposed to learn. And then I wrote resumes for a while, so I helped people find jobs. That was fun. So I wrote their resume, their document for them. And fast forward a few years, I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, and I am now hosting a personal development radio show called Success Profiles Radio. I interview world-class achievers and learn how they succeeded and what they overcome and what lessons we can learn from that. And I've gotten to interview some really amazing people. I've had Darren Hardy on my show, Jack Canfield, Dr. John DeMartini from The Secret, Laurel Langmeyer, Sharon Lecter, James Malinchak from ABC's Secret Millionaire Show. Just a lot of really fun and amazing people, and it's my happiest hour of the week. I just really enjoy that, and right now I'm working on a book with a publisher where I'm compiling some of the very best interviews from my show, and the tentative title is going to be called Conversations with High Achievers, and looking for that to be available before the holidays.
Very cool. Wow. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too.
Awesome. Okay. So I was intrigued by your book. I know that you mentioned that our show is called Navigating the Customer Experience, but it's interesting. One of the reasons why you really shone out to me, why I reached out to you, was because over the years as a customer service trainer, I found that the lack of customer experience in organizations stems from the lack of engagement from individuals, because at the end of the day, the company is the people, right?
Right.
And so if we can get the people into the right mindset to, again, going back to what you were saying, to achieve their greatest success, which is what your show is all about, I thought you would be a wonderful inspiration for our audience to really understand what are the key components to be successful as an individual. And of course, if you're successful there, it will transcend into whatever business you are in, whether you're the business owner trying to improve customer experience or whether you're the manager or the employee. So I looked at your book and I looked at some of the chapters that you had in there, and they really resonated with me. So I don't know if you could take some time and maybe go through some of those things with us, just to enlighten our audience on this wonderful book that you created called Student Leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my first book. It's been out for a little while, but what I decided to do when I wrote this book, I wanted to write a book that would appeal to young people. I think that leadership is largely absent in a lot of arenas, and the type of people who are in leadership positions, I think maybe either could do a better job or they're very self-serving, and I don't think that's leadership at all. So I wanted to write a book about that. And so what I did, and it's very interesting, when I started asking myself what makes a great leader, I just sat out on my patio and had a yellow legal pad with me, and I wrote at the top of the page, what makes a great leader? What makes an excellent leader? And my goal was to come up with 21 answers to the question. I ended up coming up with 30, but as I started writing, I realized that some of those topics were very similar, and so those 30 topics collapsed into 21, so I was thankful that I still met my goal. I think the number one thing that I wrote about was that excellent leaders have a vision for the future. You think about someone like Gene Roddenberry, a little outside the box, but he created a whole, the Star Trek universe. He just created this whole entire vision for what he thought the future should be like, an opportunity for people to explore space, a somewhat utopian environment. They didn't exchange money. They just bartered everything, which I think is pretty cool, too, just like back in the old days where you just traded things like Little House on the Prairie. But, yeah, seriously, it was like a return to that, and I just thought that was very cool. You think about the Wright brothers who created the first airplane. People told him, man's not meant to fly. That's what birds are doing. That's what they do. But they absolutely believed in their vision for the future. A modern day example, you think of Elon Musk. He created PayPal so that people would have a way to pay each other online, which has changed e-commerce immensely. He has created Tesla, the car, and now SpaceX, which is his attempt to help people be able to travel in space, very much like people fly in airplanes. And so he is just changing the world. He thinks so big, and he's got this vision. And when you can have people buy into your vision, you are going to be much more successful, because he can't do stuff like that all by himself. No one who's a great leader can accomplish anything by themselves. You think of we'll go back to politics for a second. No matter what you think of anyone who's in politics now, you think about this. They have to sell their vision of what they want to do in order to get elected and get enough people to believe in that vision. It's really a pretty amazing accomplishment, which leads to another thing that I think is very, very important to being a successful leader and to being successful in general, is just the idea of being able to network. And again, going back to the political example, you have to have a huge Rolodex of people that you can count on in order to accomplish anything. Certainly winning election is a huge that's a huge component of getting elected. Starting a big business that creates thousands and thousands of jobs and makes millions and millions of dollars. You can't do that alone. You have to have a huge network of people, and perhaps people who know people who know people, in order to get them to cooperate with what you want to do. And also the key is not just getting them to do what you want to do, but getting them to believe that what you want them to do is something that they also want to do.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you can have someone buy their vision and personalize it and think, what's in it for me, that's a huge, huge component to that.
Yeah.
And there are 21 in the book. I don't know how far you want me to go, but here's something else that I want to say too. And this is a component that I think very few people talk about. Excellent leaders make other people feel welcome in their presence.
Nice.
Absolutely, because if you are a leader and you don't feel comfortable following someone, or you don't feel comfortable with the way that the leader is acting, you're not going to stick around very long. So helping people feel comfortable in your presence means creating a culture. And again, that's something else that you help people to buy in. Anytime you're in a company, for example, you like certain companies better than others because of the culture they've created, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's true. The
Absolutely.
environment, how you feel when you go there.
Absolutely. And if you can create a culture or an environment that is very welcoming, whether it's, having a foosball table in the break room, or whether it's having vending machines, or maybe having special days. I've worked at places where, for Halloween, for example, you were allowed to dress up for Halloween. It was a fundraising place I worked for, and they had cash prizes for people who had the best costumes. It was so interesting to see what people came up with. Mm-hmm. And so you create an environment of fun, and you create a welcoming environment that people want to continue coming to. That's what excellent leaders do, because if everything is stale and status quo and we're just here to work, yeah, boring, people will not stick around as long. I think you'll find that people stick around at places that they enjoy going to every day versus places where they have to go to because they really just have to pay their bills. If it becomes a place or a situation where I'm just here to pay my bills, you're not going to buy into their vision. You're not going to have any fun. You may not work as hard. I know for myself that I take pride in my work, and I'll work as hard as I can regardless. But at the end of the day, if there is just no upward mobility, if you're perceiving that there's no fun, if you're perceiving that the leaders are out for themselves, how long are you going to want to support that? Not very long.
True. And as one of your presidents, I think, said, leadership is about getting others to do what you want done because he or she wants to do it. That was Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Yes.
It's actually exactly one of my very favorite quotes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes, too. And I think about that. In fact, I was thinking about that while I was talking a little bit earlier. And I thought it was Eisenhower, but I wasn't quite sure. So I'm very glad that you brought that up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really hit the nail on the head. And you explained it very clearly, too, in terms of letting us understand that the leader needs to make the environment comfortable and the people feel comfortable. I have a 10-year-old, and I've seen her go through different grades in prep school, and there are certain teachers that she gravitates to more than others. And I think, again, it goes back down to the environment that the teacher creates for the students, and the more engaging and fun the person is, and they welcome the students in, and they don't feel like they're afraid to express themselves. Yeah. I think those are the opportunities where learning really happens.
Yeah. And I'll just give you another example. When I was talking about teaching, public speaking is not a subject that a lot of people really enjoy taking because it's a required class. And so I made sure that the first major assignment that I gave them was to do a demonstration speech. In other words, you have to show us how to do something. You can bring props, visual aids, whatever you want. But the fun thing about that is you are already asking someone to tap into something that they know how to do very well. Mm-hmm. So it was so interesting. I had people do food speeches. Now, obviously, they couldn't prepare the whole meal in the time of their speech, but they would bring ingredients and start mixing it up. And then under the table, they would have the finished product, and then they'd bring that out. And when you're done with all of this, this is what it looks like. And then we'd get to eat it. I had a Japanese student. I was teaching at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln during my graduate school. I taught public speaking for a couple semesters there.
Right.
I had a Japanese student in my class. She was the only foreign student in my whole class. And she did her demonstration on how to use chopsticks, which I thought was really cool. She had 3 posters that she made that showed the different hand positions and with the sticks, the chopsticks. And I had a student not show up who was supposed to speak that day. And so I said, you know what? We have extra time. Did you bring extra chopsticks that maybe the class could practice with? And she said, oh, yes, I did. I said, put your posters back up on the board and pass out your chopsticks and let us practice. She was so thrilled for the opportunity to walk around the room and help people. And she would kind of grab their hands and kind of help them. And she would point at the posters once in a while. And it was just so much fun to sit back and watch.
Wow.
And so I think the whole class had fun that day, but especially that student. And she wrote on her evaluation, you know, I'm the only foreign student in the class, and Brian made me feel very comfortable to be here. And I'm just glad that I had a good experience. You know, not to pat myself on the back, but just the idea that when you create a culture of fun, it really does impact people far beyond just that class.
Definitely. And I'm sure those students who participated in the experience, if, 10 years from now they end up at a Japanese restaurant and they have to eat with chopsticks, they'll always remember that experience because it was so hands-on and practical of when they were first learning to use chopsticks, or, a class where they were practicing to use chopsticks, because it's going to be remembered in their mind because it's something they enjoyed doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so things like that are fun. And I had another student who, bless her heart, she did a demonstration on how to belly dance. I think she was in her 40s or her 50s, but she looked terrific.
Wow.
And she did her speech and she practiced, and the whole class was just engaged with that. I had another student who dressed up as a Christmas tree.
Wow.
Yeah, and so she had this green, I don't know if it was like a felt thing, and then she cut a hole for her head and she put it on and she decorated it, and at the end of her speech she plugged herself in and the lights came on.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, it was great. It was terrific. And so you get to see people's personalities when you let them dive into something that they are already good at.
True.
And it really creates a huge comfort zone, because if they can do this, then they can do the next thing, which is just a little more difficult. And then they can do the next thing, which is just a little more difficult than that. And so you build a comfort zone first, and then you springboard from that.
Awesome. Good stuff. All things that we can transfer into the customer environment. Because at the end of the day, I know you mentioned that it was a school and they treated it like a business.
Yes.
But the reality is everything that you go into, once there is some exchange of money, it is considered as a business. So your students are your customers. And unfortunately, a lot of educational institutions don't view their business or their school as a business and their students as customers. Right. So if you can come into that mindset and think, okay, if we can really create great experiences where our students go back and they're ranting and raving about how the school was great and they learned so much and they had a wonderful experience, and not just in the classroom, but even dealing with the administration staff in terms of getting documents that you may need for transfers or whatever, you'd be surprised. You'll probably have an overwhelming line of people outside for the next semester for people signing up for the programs. And you're like, oh my gosh, where did all these people come from? But it's from the word of mouth advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you feel. How do you feel about customer service as a customer yourself?
I've had great experiences and I've had bad experiences, as we all have.
Yeah.
What really gets me is when people don't listen. That is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. I have a question and they aren't answering the question that I'm asking them. They're answering the question that they feel like answering. And of course, it's because they have a script. And I think it's because perhaps that person is new, or perhaps because they don't really know. And so they just fall back to a script that they're comfortable with. And so I'll sometimes ask for a supervisor, and sometimes people are very happy to do that just to, pass the call along. And other people maybe get a little offended by that. It's like, but I can help you, but you're not being helpful. I'm sorry. I would just really rather talk to someone who can answer the specific question that I have. And I try to be nice about it, but when I find that people have given me a bad experience, then the next time that I have to call back, it's less pleasant. And sometimes what has happened is when someone isn't answering my question, or if I'm having a bad experience, they'll transfer me or they'll hang up. Heaven forbid they hang up, and so I have to call back. And so now I, the customer, am really agitated, and the poor person who has to take my call next is going to get the brunt of it. Mm-hmm. Here's something that really irritates me. If it's a situation where I have to call back on an ongoing issue and it involves more than one conversation, what really irritates me is when someone hasn't taken notes about the first call that I had. I had a situation once. The call was 45 minutes long. And so I called a couple of months later to follow up on the issue that I had spoken about before. And I had asked a question about the company's fees for the thing that they were doing for me. And the answer that the first person gave me was awesome. I mean, I liked the answer that I got. But when I called back the second time and asked about that rep said, there are no notes about that. I said, you're kidding. We talked 45 minutes, and that topic was 30 minutes of our talk. And that rep didn't make any notes about that at all. I was not happy, because now there's no way to document. Well, the call was recorded, so I said, you can go back and listen to the recording of that call if you'd like, but I assure you, this is what the last person told me. But yeah, I mean, making proper notes. You have to make good notes. And I think this particular rep probably also didn't really know or wasn't really sure. And so to cover her backside on that issue, she just chose not to make notes about that at all, thinking, okay, if I didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Well, no, the call was recorded. And I had that happen several times. This was an ongoing issue that I dealt with for several months, and finally everything got resolved in a way that I was satisfied with. But yeah, when you are dealing with a customer, and I've come from a call center environment where I've been in quality assurance or customer service or inside sales, you take notes about what was going on, because if I am dealing with a person who has called back a second or a third or a fourth time, and they are saying, the last time I called, we discussed such and such, and if I see that there are not any notes about that, I just start boiling a little bit, because that's an example of someone who I think passed the buck or just simply chose not to do their job. Sure. And so I will say, you know what, I apologize that the notes on that are a little sketchy. Can you please explain to me what happened? And if it means that they're going to vent at me, then so be it. I'll just be the one that takes it. And then I will promise to do what I can.
Yeah, that's just so true. I do believe as well that listening plays an integral role in the customer experience. And a lot of times when there's that disconnect, why the customer gets upset, sometimes it's not the big things. It's just the little things that, I'm saying something to you that is really important to me, but for some reason, when it's being transmitted into your brain, you are not communicating back to me in a message that is answering what I'm asking.
Right, exactly. And another thing, too, for people out there who are in customer service, if someone is ranting at you, it may not necessarily be your fault. It may not be your company's fault. Maybe that person has had a genuinely horrible day, and you are just the person that has to hear it.
True.
And so you just have to, apologize, and I'm so sorry you've had a bad day. What can I do to make your day better? I want to help you have a good experience here today. And just saying something like that might bring the walls down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it starts. But just, empathy is so important. Listening and empathy. And then finally, if you promise to do something, do what you can to make sure that happens. And then follow up. This is something else that bothers me a little bit, is when someone says, I will follow up with a phone call or an email about the resolution of this, and then I never hear from them again. And so that's another reason why I have to call back. I was promised that I would hear back to make sure that my issue got resolved. Oh, I'm so sorry you didn't hear back from someone. Well, I'll make sure that you get followed up with. Well, that person didn't do it either. Like, what is wrong with this organization? It's like, I've actually told people, look, I cannot possibly recommend you, because you don't follow up, you don't fulfill on your promises. That is huge. I mean, when when something that seems ordinary becomes extraordinary, such as, I promise that I'll get back with you on this, that should be an expectation. That shouldn't have to be perceived as extraordinary customer service. That should be just something that you should do, because if you say you're going to do something, then please just do it.
True.
Yeah.
True. Very true. Okay, so if you're sitting next to another business owner, and I'm sure you interview many of them throughout your podcast, what are some everyday solutions that you believe you could recommend to them? Maybe 2 that could help them improve their customer experience. 2 things that you would tell them to definitely focus on.
I mean, as I'm talking to a business owner?
Yeah.
Here's what I would do. I would say this, and I wouldn't expect very many business owners to actually have time to do this, but I would say, why don't you spend a day in the trenches with your team so that you can see and hear exactly what's going on a daily basis?
Be an undercover boss.
Absolutely. Why not? What have you got to lose?
True.
I mean, when you think of a show like Undercover Boss on television, they get in the trenches with their people, and of course they don't tell them who they are. It's so interesting. You get to meet the people on your team. You get to learn what they're going through every single day. Let them train you as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if you sit with enough people in one day, or if you take some calls, you're going to get a much better sense of what's going on your team, and then you can make training recommendations. I think that would be really outstanding, because if you can feel and experience what your team is feeling and experiencing, or the other closely related selection, be a mystery shopper. Call your company, call your customer service department, and see how they treat you, see how they handle things. It's one thing to role play in a training environment. It's quite another to either call the customer service department yourself, or to have someone mystery shop and see how they treat you.
True.
Yeah.
True, and some of them are in for a pretty rude awakening, because, you know, they're preaching one thing when they're marketing and advertising, but when they actually have the experience, they realize that there's no congruence between what they're saying they're doing and what's actually happening.
Exactly. So those would be my two suggestions. Be in the trenches with your team for a day, and mystery shop your company to see what kind of experience that you are actually receiving, and if that jives with your mission. And if it doesn't, then some training needs to happen. Not saying use it as a reason to fire somebody, although if somebody commits something, an act or says something that's really egregious, then I think an action plan is necessary. Right. But use it as a training experience, and just to see what is your customer actually experiencing when they call your company. And I think it's far better for you to see and hear that than it is to have a customer see and hear that first. So yeah, use that as a training opportunity and make your company better. Especially, I mean, if your company is interested in being better and performing at a world-class level, you'll do this. And I know that there are companies that do this. They'll have mystery shoppers. And I think that's a great idea.
Yes, it is indeed. Very, very important, mystery shopping. I would love if more people would log on to that idea, because it would definitely help their businesses.
Yes.
Okay. Brian, how do you stay motivated every day?
I think it has a lot to do with hanging around with people who have similar goals and a similar mission to myself. Jim Rohn says you are the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most. So if you are not experiencing financial success, look at the 5 people you hang around with most. Chances are they aren't either. If you're 30 pounds overweight and you wish that you had a better body, look at the 5 people you're hanging around with the most. They're probably eating, Oreos on the couch after work too. So it just makes a lot of sense. So find 5 people. If you want to lose weight, find 5 people who look great, feel great, have a handle on their eating patterns, and ask them what they're doing, and ask them for advice. Even get a personal trainer if you really need to, and there's nothing wrong with that. I find that once I've started doing my show, I am running around with people who are really good at a lot of things. I mean, a really good friend of mine now is just starting his journey as a personal trainer, an online personal trainer. He looks terrific. He has a great attitude. He's transitioning out of a family business that is not fulfilling, but he just recently completed his certification. He's going to start advertising very, very soon, and he's so excited about this. And so being able to share that journey with him has been amazing. And I know several online personal trainers, people who maybe want to help you become a better salesperson. I know several sales trainers online. People who want to help you with online marketing. I know several people in that space. And so if I really want to learn those things, I know immediately who some people are that I can tap into and get some help with.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in terms of staying motivated, apart from surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, your health, because there are 7 dimensions to wellness and your health plays an integral role in that.
Yeah.
Do you practice any of that as an individual yourself in terms of maybe meditation or yoga, or are you a kickbox kind of guy?
I enjoy walking and running. And I feel like when I have an opportunity to do that, I can get, lost in my own thoughts and focus. If I'm, walking outside, for example, out in nature. In Arizona right now, it's too hot to do that. And so I have joined a gym where I can exercise indoors. But I really feel like if you take care of yourself and who you are, mm-hmm. then you have something to give to other people. It's very much like when you fly in an airplane, and at the very beginning of the flight, the flight attendants give the speech about, if the oxygen mask falls, put it on yourself first before administering it to your young ones.
Right.
And I always used to wonder why not take care of the other people first? Well, if you don't have anything to give, you can't take care of someone else.
True.
If you can't breathe, you can't take care of your little ones. So put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then help the people around you. And that does make perfect sense.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. I used to be a flight attendant, so I completely
Really?
understand.
What airline did you fly with?
I flew with my national airline, Air Jamaica.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they're no longer in operation, but it was a wonderful experience, and it laid the platform for who I am today.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so Brian, tell us what's one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Interestingly enough, I'm going to say Facebook. Mm-hmm. Because, it's absolutely true, because I get guests for my show mostly through Facebook, people that I have admired, and I can reach out to them, or people who are my friends who are doing great things, or people who refer guests to me. I also help people write their books. And so I've been having conversations with people about hiring me to do that, and it's all been organic through Facebook. I haven't done Facebook ads yet at all, but over the last several months, I've talked with a number of people, and I'm going to get started with a couple people here real soon, so I'm very, very excited about that.
Very cool. Wow.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I like the fact that you shared about helping people to write their books. Do you help them from conceptuality all throughout the writing process?
Absolutely. I think everybody has a book inside them somewhere, somehow. Mm-hmm. And so we talk about the topic and what makes your topic unique. Because let's just say, for example, let's just say that you wanted to write a book on customer service. There are so many books out there about that. I mean, it's a very hot topic. So I would say, what spin do you place on this topic that would make your book interesting to read, that would not be like all the other books out there? And we talk about some of those things. And of course, that would be an exploration of your background and what you've gone through. Mm-hmm. That would certainly help. So we do that, and I can coach them through what topics that can be talked about in the book. We can create an outline together. We can talk about the life stories that you would share, because people relate to stories. Jesus told parables. He taught his lessons in parables. The people who were enlightened to understand it did, and the people who didn't had no idea what he was talking about. And that was his way of teaching to the people who were meant to hear his message. So life stories, very, very important. People relate to specific stories and examples. And you don't want it to be all about the examples, but you want to make a point and then use the story to back up whatever it is that you're talking about.
True.
And so I do calls with people once a week, and people can message me unlimited with their short questions, and we put this thing together, and I'll review the draft and make suggestions, and we just mold it and create a sculpture out of it, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you help with the publishing aspects as well?
Yeah, we do the self-publishing thing, and so I can have resources who can format and lay the book out. I've got resources that can design a book cover, and I also have a printer that can print it out. So yeah.
Wow, awesome! So it's like a one-stop shop. Get everything.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. So that dovetails nicely into our next question. What are some of the books that you have read in your years of development that have had the biggest impact on you?
So many. I would say the first would be Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles. Mm-hmm. When that came out in 2005, that's the only book I read all year long, and I read it 2.5 times. I was in the middle of my third time when the year ended, and there were so many exercises and suggestions for things that you can do. And I had my pencil, and I would make marks in the margins and check marks and stars and do all kinds of things. And he's been on my show.
Yes, I remember. I listened to one of the episodes that you did with him. It was awesome.
It was one of my favorite episodes. In fact, he was on in 2015. He had the 10th anniversary edition. And so I thought, what a perfect opportunity to have him on. And I told him, Jack, I am such a huge fan of that book. Mm-hmm. That is the only book I read in all of 2005. And I just read it, several times, and did my 101 life, things that I want to do in my life. Now we call it a bucket list. That term was not in vogue yet back then. But shortly after, people start calling that their bucket list. And so I've done some of the things that I want to do, and now I'm just going to recreate that list and just start fresh, because I want to keep my focus forward on some things.
Right.
Not focus on the things that are already done, but just to. In fact, one of the things that I wrote down on my bucket list back then was to have a radio show. And here I am.
That.
So 4.5 years into it, and then January it'll be my 5th anniversary. So, yeah, so that's great. And of course, being able to interview the great people that I've had. I've got a dream list of people that I want to interview, and I've got probably 50 or 55, and I've probably interviewed maybe a dozen. And of course, this dream list I've reached very, very high. Mm-hmm. I would love to interview William Shatner, but he doesn't do a lot of media anymore, and he's in his 80s. I think he would be such a fascinating interview.
Yeah.
I mean, that man has reinvented himself so many times. After Star Trek ended, that's all people wanted to talk about. He wanted to get away from that. And I think there were some struggles on his part for a while. Then T.J. Hooker came around in the late 70s, early 80s, and then Boston Legal. And, of course, the Star Trek movies came out. And I think he just finally embraced that this is who people are going to remember me for, so why not just run with it and go?
Yeah.
And he's done very, very well for himself, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jack Canfield, The Success Principles, and any others that maybe had a great impact on you?
Oh, my gosh. I'm reading The 10X Rule right now by Grant Cardone.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I'm probably only 2 or 3 chapters away from being done. But just the whole idea that setting big, massive goals for yourself and then taking big, massive action on it. And so that book, along with several others, has really helped me focus on thinking really, really big. In fact, the first personal development book that I read is called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. It was written, I think, in the 50s. If you read some of the examples, and he throws out examples of the kinds of money that people made, those numbers obviously are not the big lofty numbers that you would think now. So I mean, read that book within the context of the period that it was written, but just the whole idea that you can just think big and do all kinds of things. In fact, there's one example that he wrote about. He wrote about this guy that found a big plot of land, several miles outside of town, and he decided, why not subdivide that and sell the individual lots so that people could build their dream home or a retreat home outside of town, so they could just spend the weekends out in the country or live out in the country away from the hustle and bustle. And so he bought this huge plot of land, subdivided it into like 8 or 10 or 12 lots, and sold the individual lots and made so much more money than he paid for it. He had it rezoned for residential. I don't know what it was zoned for, but he rezoned the land and got architects and surveyors and just the whole ball of wax and just went all in on this vision. And it was fantastic.
Awesome. All right. So we looked at the books that have had the greatest impact on you. Just for review for our listeners, Jack Canfield, The Success Principles, Grant Cardone, The 10X Rule, and David Schwartz, The Magic of Thinking Big, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Now, what is the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you are really excited about? Something that maybe that you're working on to develop yourself or your people?
I would have to say it's the book that I'm currently working on, Conversations with High Achievers. I've had some of the interviews transcribed, and I'm doing some editing, and then I've got some extra writing to do on top of that. But that's the thing that keeps me focused forward. I want to be done writing it by the end of the month, and I want it to be available before the holidays. And just the idea that this book, I think, could be a huge springboard for even more speaking opportunities, potentially a huge springboard for doing a live event someday, and having some of these great speakers come speak at my event. Stuff like that really excites me, providing an opportunity for people to learn and develop themselves. And as I revisit all of these great interviews that I've had a chance to do, I'm relearning so many things. Yeah. So that's been a huge blessing. So listening to interviews with successful people, I think, is something that anyone can do to develop themselves.
Awesome. So you're working on that book, and you said you're aiming for the release for January 2017, right?
Well, hopefully before then. Before then. Yeah, I would like to see. Well, the e-version I hope is going to be available before Christmas.
Okay.
And I'll have some physical copies for myself, and the publisher is going to get this in the stores sometime, maybe in the spring or early summer next year.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So those listeners that are tuning into this episode, if they wanted to find you online so that they could definitely follow your journey and your story and that book when it comes out so they could benefit from it, how could they find you online?
That's a great question. I'm on Facebook. My page is Success Profiles Radio. And I also have a personal profile there too. You can, follow me and be friends with me there. Mm-hmm. On Twitter at Mr. Brian K. Wright. I am on LinkedIn, and my profile picture for all of those platforms is exactly the same. My show page, my radio show page, is successprofilesradio.com. My website is briankwright.com. And if anyone wants to email me, brian@briankwright.com. And that's Brian with an I, BRIAN, @briankwright.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian.
Oh, thank you so much, Yannick. It was fun.
Now, right before we end the podcast episode, we like to ask our guests, maybe, if you have one quote or saying that during times of challenge and obstacles, this is kind of the one quote that comes back into your mind to help you refocus and continue on your journey and not get discouraged. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, this happened to me earlier this week. I had a moment where I was feeling a little overwhelmed by things, and I just had this moment where I just heard a voice speak to me, and it said, "Behold, I do a new thing for you." I read the Bible. I don't know how many of your listeners do, but that's a Bible verse, and that's just a promise that is given in the Bible. Behold, I do a new thing for you. And so what that said to me was, you are not going to stay where you are forever. Something new is on the horizon for you, something wonderful, something great, something fantastic that will just change your life. And so I am believing that promise that new things are on the horizon very, very shortly. That keeps me going.
Wow. Could you share with us what Bible verse that is?
I wish I could remember. Let me look it up. I'm on Google. I'm tired.
Yes, with the age of Google, there's nothing that we can't Google.
Oh my gosh, Google is one of my very best friends. Okay, Isaiah 43:19.
Wow. Okay, Isaiah 43 verse 19. Awesome.
Yeah. In fact, I use Google as my spell check. I fully own that.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing how the world has changed, because I was looking at some encyclopedias we have downstairs. Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder how many students still actually take up an encyclopedia, because the kids are so programmed nowadays that anything they need to know, they just Google it, either Google or YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. The same thing happens when the new phone book comes. The kids these days are thinking, what is that? Oh, we used to look this up if we needed a phone number. You're kidding me with this. This was our Google. This before the computers came out.
Yeah, that is true. I know, because right now you just Google the company name or some telephone directory companies, they've transformed into online, so they have an app. So if you have the app on your phone, once you just go into the app and type in the local business name, the number and the address and everything comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Behold, I do a new thing for you. Beautiful thought.
I love that quote. I'm definitely going to take it on and listen to it, read that chapter myself. So
good.
I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Absolutely.
So, Brian, I really enjoyed this interview. I think our listeners got great nuggets and tips that they can use to help to develop themselves and great inspiration. I'm going to encourage our listeners as well that you should head on over to iTunes and definitely become a subscriber of Brian's podcast, Success Profile Radios. I'm a subscriber and I listen to his episodes. I hope I'll be able to listen to all of them because I just recently became a subscriber in the last month. Yeah. But as much spare time that you can find, it's very inspirational. It gives practical ideas. And regardless of whatever industry or business you're in, even if right now you're just a couch potato and you don't know what you want to do, I guarantee Brian's show will give you some inspiration and motivation to get there.
Yeah, Success Profiles Radio is my favorite thing to do. So I really appreciate that. And a review would be great. Not only subscribe, but review it too. And just let me know what you got out of it. That would mean a lot.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so thank you again, Brian.
Thank you so much.
For those listening, we just want to remind you that you can follow us over on Twitter at NavigatingCX. And if you want to have further conversations with us, we have a private Facebook group called Navigating the Customer Experience Community, where we have our past guests, listeners of our podcast, and anyone that's passionate about, customer experience, leadership, personal development. If you want to hang out with us further and have more conversations, that's definitely a medium to get through to all of us. So feel free to drop on over at Facebook and be a part of that community. So thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Navigating the Customer Experience. I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.